How are you doing? It's been a while since we've talked, and I thought we'd have a quick call on some of the recent news that's got put out and do a little update on our call from Mosul from last year. What do you think of the new CBI rate?
It's been about 10 months since we did one of these calls, since the whole Mosul thing happened, which we were right about. We said that the year would end without any change in the value of the currency, that Mosul had absolutely nothing to do with the exchange rate. And but we have finally had a change in the exchange rate.
Yeah, it just went the wrong way. I think people were expecting something a little different, but then again, when you look at the economy of Iraq and what it's accomplished in the past year, it's like you posted last year. You expected it to be around 1,200, plus or minus a little bit, but that was it. It was the economy wasn't in the greatest shape last year, and it's picking up a little bit as far as the news is coming out, but nothing.
Yeah, well,
drastic.
What you have to do, you have to be mindful of the fact that the currency's value is not determined by politics. It's not determined by what happens within the country as far as like even GDP is concerned, whether the economy is doing good, economy is doing bad, this president, that president, this governor of the CBI or that governor, all of those things really don't have that much to do with the value of the currency. The way that they determine the currency's value, and it's been this way since they introduced the IQD, is the money supply and the foreign currency reserves that are backing the money supply. And one thing that I noticed was that the money supply was not going down, but the total of the foreign currency reserves was going down. Ever since ISIS came into the country in 2014, it seemed like they were dipping into their foreign currency reserves, not only because of dealing with the internal, all of the internal problems that they had in the country, but also the oil
to fight ISIS.
Down.
Yeah, they needed to fight ISIS, big time, and get them out.
They had to fight ISIS, and at the same time, their oil revenues were down because the price of oil was coming down. I remember when I got into the dinar, the price of the barrel of oil was up around $100 a barrel, but it dropped down to about $30 or $40 a barrel there for a while. I think it's back up around 60 now, something 70, or it's gone.
I think it's around up. Yeah, it's around 70 right now, but it was hovering near 100 a while back, but that was a long while back.
Right, but it did go down. I think it went all the way down to $30 a barrel, and then bounced back up. But that lowering of the price of oil hurt their oil revenues, and as a result, they were running a deficit. They had to dip into their foreign currency reserves, and like you said, fighting ISIS as well. Anyway, when your foreign currency reserves are going down, but your money supply is not, how does that affect the value of the currency? What puts downward pressure on the value of the currency? And that's why I said I thought by the end of 2017, the exchange rate, instead of 11.84 to the dollar, it would be more like 1,200 to the dollar. Well, it didn't happen in 2017. It happened a few days ago, and it didn't go all the way up to 1,200. It just went up to 11.90. But that's still a devaluation. The value is going down, not up. And that was the point that I was making.
Yeah, I think it instead of the 1,200, which you were kind of indicating at, it went to 11.90, is because the conditions in Iraq as far as the economy goes has improved a bit. And the ISIS problem is really not a problem too much. They still have some pockets that they're clearing up. We mentioned that last year. Mm-hmm. But the pockets that they're clearing up is not as much. I mean, it's pretty much diminishing a little by little. And they've got it just basically over in Syria now. And they're fighting that over there in Syria. But obviously they're able to, capture a little bit more money from the sales of oil and a few other things that are going on. They've got lots of loans that, people are just putting lots of money into Iraq for one reason or another. A lot of it's humanitarian aid and rebuilding some of the cities that are just devastated over there. Mosul is one of them. The news coming out of Mosul right now is they're now digging up all of the bodies. They didn't realize they had that many bodies there.
Yeah.
Underneath all the rubble. So, they'll eventually get to the point where, the rubble will be gone, the bodies will all be, taken care of and everything else. And they're actually going to be able to start rebuilding some of the devastation, the bridges, the buildings, and everything else. But in order to do that, they need money. Right. And that's one of the reasons why they had that Kuwaiti conference, because a body was looking for people to invest in the country of Iraq.
Right.
Not invest in the currency, but invest in actual projects like rebuilding the highways and the electric lines and the water and the buildings, basically.
The infrastructure of the country. Yeah, and you listen to these gurus, you think that, they need all this money to do all these projects, so that means they're going to RV. No. They've been saying that for the last at least 8 years that, they have to RV to have enough money to do these things. No. If it was that easy, every country would revalue their currency to solve any shortage of funding for any project, but you can't just pull money out of thin air. And if Iraq were to revalue their currency up to $1, $2, $3, basically that's what they'd be doing. They'd just be pulling it out of thin air.
Yeah, they're just having a hard time with trying to get investors.
Right. Well, as far as far back I think as 2011, Shabibi was going around. You remember he came to the U.S. back in 2011 and spoke in Washington, and they were doing a lot of promotion for invest in Iraq, and they were not saying buy the dinar. They were trying to get people to come over there and invest in manufacturing or invest in some agriculture or some service-based. They were trying to build other sectors of their economy other than just oil.
Yeah, and that's what the IMF and World Bank have kind of been telling them for years, to diversify their economy a little bit. You can't just depend on oil because the price of oil goes up and down so much.
Right. Well, they want to model their economy after Western economies like the U.S. and Japan. And in order to do that, they've got to stimulate the other sectors. And this is what they were hoping, is that foreign investment would come in and foreign investors would bring people, experts in different fields, to come in, show them how to do things, how to have a manufacturing base, how to have a service-based economy, or how to have modern agricultural techniques and so forth. That's what they were trying to do, instead of just drilling for more oil, because oil really doesn't produce that many jobs.
No, not really. And when you think about it, with
compared to manufacturing
changes, with the changes in something as simple as the cars are getting better fuel mileage, we're using less oil. We're not as dependent on oil as we used to be. Like back in the 70s and I think 90s was another one of those oil crunches where, they held people hostage and just raised the prices incredibly just because they could. But here's another thing with the oil. Obviously everybody knows Iraq is oil. It's got a lot of oil. They're the second largest in the Middle East as far as their oil reserves. One thing they can't do, though, and people don't understand this, is they can't just produce a lot of oil and put it out on the market and sell it, because there's no demand for it. All they can do is, sell it out a little bit and fill up all the tanks, that people have. But once they fill up all the storage tanks and whatever, they won't be able to sell any more oil. There will be no more income to them.
And the reason that demand has gone down is because the West has become more independent and self-reliant as far as energy sources. That's a big problem with the fracking industry, and the fracking in the oil industry. We're producing more and more of our own oil now, so we're not as dependent on foreign oil, and we were a big customer base for that oil. I mean, they sell to a lot of other countries too, but I'm just saying there are a number of factors: the fracking and the move toward alternative energy sources, fuel sources. You've got hybrid cars now that don't necessarily always run on oil. So it's a shifting economy, global economy, as well as just the technology is changing as well. I drove through West Texas a couple of years ago and saw these wind farms out there in West Texas. It's unbelievable. That didn't exist 15, 20 years ago. But now you drive through West Texas and you just see mile after mile after mile of wind farms. These huge wind farms out there.
Just to highlight a little bit, too, about, we're talking about Iraq and them selling oil. It's not just Iraq and them selling oil. It's all the oil nations that sell oil are having a problem.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
and the reason is just as you described. Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, all of those other places are having a problem with oil as well because they depend on the oil sales to generate the revenue for them.
Yeah. So, there are a lot of issues that needed to be addressed within Iraq regarding their economy. They can't be solved just by drilling more oil and trying to sell more oil. They've got to move toward a diversified economy, and that's not going to happen overnight. And we talked about this in that last call, that these are kind of things that take decades to do, not for a few years. If they
one of the things right now that's coming out of the news is the drought. I mean, they're a desert country, and there's the water is an issue over there, but you need the water for agriculture. And I've been seeing some news articles come out about the wheat crop and the rice crop, and some of the other crops that they do have over there aren't getting the water, so they aren't able to plant the fields because they can't produce anything from them. Mm-hmm. And Turkey's got them a little bit over the head on that because they get their water supply from Turkey, and as Turkey cuts off the water allocations, Iraq even gets less water. And so they're really going to have a problem with water this year. They've got to do something about the water. Yep.
There are so many moving parts to their economy, and they've got to have a lot of things go right to actually pull off a Western model economy. I hope they can do it. I think it would be great to have a country in the Middle East that is an example to the other Arab nations, that you don't have to have this old-style economy where you have the ruling elite and then all of the peasants working in the oil industry. You can actually have a multifaceted economy where you've got people actually innovating and getting more educated along the lines of technology and so forth. I mean, can you imagine if Iraq had a computer industry, manufacturing computers or phones or wireless technology somehow. Can you imagine what that would do to their neighbors if they saw Iraq developing in all of these areas and being a model for the other economies? I hope that they can pull it off. I'm not too optimistic, but that was the goal. The goal was to show all of those countries in that region what a democracy and capitalism can do.
Yeah. Well, I think we hit on the recent news with the CBI changing the rate. I think that it's not really news. It was kind of expected, and to go the direction that a lot of us were kind of predicting that it would go. But as far as the gurus go, not one of them had any idea that was going to happen.
Yeah,
they're all saying it's going to come out at the $3 rate or whatever. It's going to happen overnight and blah, blah, blah. Not one of them said anything that, it's going to go down a little bit first and then it's going to go up. No one said nothing.
And it's been this way as long as I've been in the dinar world. For 8 years, they've always been saying it's going to go up, and then when it goes down, none of them had a clue. None of them predicted that. None of them had intel, even though they all claim that they've got intel and they've got contacts with the CBI and everything. When it went from 1170 to 1166, none of those guys said, hey, I just got off the phone with my contact in Iraq, and they're going to bump the value up a little bit, 4 pips.
Yeah.
Nobody
or say it's going to go down a little bit or whatever.
Right. It went from 1166 to 1184 a couple of years ago. Nobody had a heads up.
No one said anything, and when it happened, there was no fanfare either. The CBI just changed the rate, and you had to discover it. You actually had to go to the CBI site. You had to be watching the CBI site to know that it even changed. So there's no news articles, no nothing. They just did it.
I don't know. I haven't looked that closely, but from what I've seen, none of the gurus have even addressed this yet.
I think a couple of them have. They've had a few days to address it. And obviously, I haven't been following with the gurus, how they've addressed it or anything like that, because pretty much whatever those gurus are saying is not right.
Right. Yeah, how would they explain it?
Yeah, I mean, they're just trying to figure out what dinarians want to hear so that they can capture their audience and obviously generate revenue for them. I mean, that's the one thing that these gurus have done consistently over the years is generate revenue for them.
Right, and you got to keep that hope alive. You got to keep people believing in the investment so that you can keep those advertising revenues and all those clicks coming.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the other thing that I kind of had on my list to talk to you about was a pegged currency. Now, Caparoni put out that they have so many more days to become within compliance of some 90-day thing, to be within so a certain percentage of the market rate and the rate. I mean, however you want to put it, but they're looking towards to getting to Article 8. And getting to Article 8 means that they will get off the peg and float the currency. And I'm trying to wrap my head around that. And it's like, you know what? The rate within 2% doesn't mean squat as far as the currency exchange rate goes, because the CBI has changed the exchange rate how many times now in the past decade?
Well, I know from 2006 to 2009, they changed it like a dozen times or so.
But it wasn't, they didn't get off the peg, and they didn't free float the currency.
It was a
in
crawling
order to do
peg.
that.
They called it a crawling peg. But it was still pegged. It was just that they were frequently adjusting it to where the value would go up slightly. And that was a strategic move to bring the rate of inflation down. We talked about that last time. But it was still pegged. It went through a series of adjustments on that crawling peg But then as of January 1st, 2009, they went back to the policy of exchange rate stability, and they changed the value 3 times in the last 9 years. That's stability.
That is. That kind of says that's where it's going to be.
Yeah.
You know, unless there's something that's drastic going to happen, and it's not going to happen overnight. Obviously, right. The CBI is not going to move on anything rather quickly because they don't have to.
Right. Yeah, a lot of people don't understand this. But they're not going to move the value unless they absolutely have to. They want that stability.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, you got to find a reason for them to change the exchange rate. It's not going to become because some guru says they're going to do it. Iraq has to benefit from it. If Iraq doesn't benefit from it, it's not going to happen. If you also look at all the other countries in the region, they're all pegged.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
they have to be because they're all oil-based, and the price of oil fluctuates too much that they can't have any stability in an oil-based economy with a free-floating currency. The only way they can keep those exchange rates stable is to keep them pegged and manipulate the money supply to maintain that stability. This is what I was talking about earlier. Who are the countries that have a currency on Forex? You got the U.S., you have Japan, you have Brazil, you have the euro, the pound, the Aussie dollar, the Canadian dollar. These are Western-style economies. They're diversified. The people are well-educated and so forth. This is what they want in Iraq, but they are too far away from that to even consider going to a free-floating currency. So anybody who comes out and says, yeah, that's what the IMF is talking about, they're going to go on a free float. No, not for another 30, 40 years after they've developed a Western-style economy, if that ever happens.
Yeah.
So, but, you know, these guys, all of them, I mean, let's just name a few here. You were talking earlier about the exchange rate before we started the call. We were talking about how the gurus were saying they're going to raise the value up to $3. This is something that Breitling has said over the years repeatedly, that the Ministry of Planning in Iraq said that the MOP report, M-O-P, Ministry of Planning, they said that they were going to raise the value up to $1 or something, and then eventually they were going to raise it on up to $3+. If you read that article, it's very clear that they're not talking about raising the value up to $1 and then to $3. What they're talking about is reducing the value from $3 down to $1 and then reassessing it later. Well, the value hasn't been $3 since the Saddam days.
Yeah,
that's an old article talking about the old Iraqi dinar, how they thought it was overvalued at $3. They were recommending revaluing or devaluing it down to about $1.17, and then reassessing that from time to time. It had nothing to do with the IQD. And these people, these gurus like Breitling, have been completely misrepresenting that Ministry of Planning report. Obviously, they can't raise the value up to $3 or $1. If they even raised it to a penny, it would devastate their economy because that would be a 1,000% increase. They don't want to do more than a few percent at a time. And then you got guys like Dave Schmidt, okay? That guy's a piece of work. He started off talking about the RV, and then he starts talking about the GCR, and then he starts talking about these private exchanges. He's just gone from one thing to another, and basically his whole thing is, you know, I can't give you a whole lot of information now, but come to my seminar, and then we'll talk about it.
And then when you go to a seminar, I've heard reports that when you're there, he tells you, well, go look at my YouTube videos. It answers all your questions. So it's like a catch. It's a catch-22. But here's one question that, you know, where Dave blocked me a little bit on his YouTube channel is I asked a question. Why do you have to purchase these currencies in order to get paid out on these private exchanges. Why these currencies? Now, I didn't say these currencies. I called them the scam currencies. It's because they're currencies that are related to scamish type issues with all these gurus, the dinar, the dong, the real, and all of those other things. They pick the bottom currencies and all of a sudden say they're going to revalue or hurry up and buy them now because we've got these private people who are going to pay you a whole lot more for them for some reason, and you're going to miss out. Part of the high pressure sales to actually sell the currency.
Right.
That's kind of what some of the currency dealers were doing back then, was a little bit of, it's going to revalue, but they stayed pretty clear of actual days, rates, numbers, and all that other stuff.
Right.
But that's what the gurus did. The gurus are the ones that dates, rates, and all the other things. I guess after the Sterling case is over, we can ask Terry K. how he made out with all of that. I mean, that's, I hate to throw Sterling and him under the bus a little bit for that, but basically that's what they did.
Right.
They promoted.
It eventually came out that they were compensating Terry K. to the tune of about $50,000 a year for his intel.
Yeah. And the one thing I noticed is when Sterling got raided by the FBI, all of the dinar sites changed drastically. All of a sudden, their ads started getting removed. Not just from Sterling ads, all the other company ads started getting removed too. And I think it was, about a month later, Dinar Corp got in a little bit of a problem with the reserves. And so when they went after him on that, I mean, that changed everybody's tune on reserves. And that's something that Sterling was involved with too, is, a reserve or the layaway plan or whatever they wanted to call it. But since now that you have those two companies, major dinar companies, that dealt with reserves no longer in business, that kind of blew everybody's reserves away. They lost money.
Right. They made a lot of money on that reserve program. It was kind of like, I guess it's kind of like commodities trading, where they were using a lot of leverage. And people, if you know anything about commodities trading, if you don't have enough to cover, then you're out because you do it on leverage. And if that commodity price or futures or whatever, if it moves too much one direction or another, then, and you don't have enough to stay in the game, then you lose everything that you put out there. And this is what was happening with dinar people. If it doesn't RV by the date that you thought it would, then you've got to come up with enough to pay off the balance on the dinar that you ordered. Because you just put a down payment down on it. You didn't have to pay the rest until a certain date, betting on the RV happening by that date. Well, of course, it didn't happen by that date, so you got to meet your call, so to speak. You've got to come up with the money to pay off the balance, or you lose everything that you put into it so far. And this was like unregistered commodities trading, and when the government got wind of what these people were doing, they started going after them on this. That's illegal.
So, but what it is, you got the gurus that are promoting this big RV, and obviously they're trying to get you to get involved and get invested quick. The little bit of pressure sales on that, and you didn't have enough money to do it, so you bought into the layaway program, figuring it's going to RV, and then you can pay off your layaway, and you just got stuck. Yeah, you either ended up paying off your layaway and getting dinar, or you got caught in when they got raided or shut down, and that was the end of it.
And Dinar Corp came up with this idea of the safe reserve program, to where you wouldn't lose your money if there was no RV by the date you could still hang on to whatever dinar that you bought. And I mean, like if you only put up $1,000 and it had like a $9,000 balance, and there was no RV, well, you still get your $1,000 worth. You didn't lose it. So that was a safe reserve program. And a lot of people thought, oh, that's so much better. We're not going to get, we're not going to lose all of our money that we've invested now. We'll just not get it to be, we won't be able to buy as much as we hoped. Anyway, they found out that they didn't have enough to cover everything. They were selling dinar that they didn't actually have in inventory.
Yeah.
And so it was still a bit of a scam. And they busted the guy, shut the thing down. Then shortly after that, they got, I guess Sterling was shut down first, and then Dinar Corp. But I mean, it was just one after. They were just falling like dominoes there for a while, these dinar dealers. And I guess there's still a couple of good-sized dealers that are in business. But, if you're a dinar investor, you got to ask yourself, if I want to sell this stuff back, who's going to buy it? Because there were people who bought from Sterling with the understanding that any time they decided to get out, Sterling would buy it back from them at a loss, but they would still buy it back. Well, Sterling's gone now. You can't sell back to Sterling. Dinar Corp is gone. You can't sell back to Dinar Corp.
Dinar Trade is gone too. And,
right, Ali.
Ali. And I guess one of the deals that Dinar Inc. had was they took over the Dinar Inc. guarantees, except for the reserve program, of course, that if you bought currency from Dinar Trade, Dinar Inc. would honor that. So obviously your certificate of authority was good with them when you went to go sell it back or trade it for a different currency or whatever deal you wanted to make with them.
If you hung on to your Dinar Trade certificate of authenticity, then Dinar Inc. will honor it. Otherwise, your choice is Craigslist or eBay.
Yeah, or go through the red tape at the other dinar dealers and, go through them. They want to know basically all the information, Social Security number, et cetera,
right,
in order for them to buy it back from you and stuff like that. But there's a lot of red tape in order to do it. And then not only that, you have to send the currency in first and let them inspect it before they're even going to pay you for it. And I've seen a lot of places where people sent in uncirculated currency and sent it into these, specialty dinar dealers, let's call it that. And when they got it, they said it was used currency, and they sent them the price for used currency, not uncirculated. And it's like you were just kind of stuck right there. There's nothing you can do or prove any otherwise. Or go through the red tape and, try and get your uncirculated currency back. But I've just seen a few things about that as well. It's like what they say in Dinarland, don't let your currency out of your hands. Basically go to either a reputable dealer, which there really isn't any more reputable dealers. I mean, if Sterling goes down, hey, that was known as the most reputable dealer there was, and they're not in business anymore. And I think the other company, Dinar Inc., is still dealing with dinar and stuff like that, but they just don't deal with just the specialty currencies like the Vietnamese dong and the dinar and the rial or whatever. There's just a list of about 5 or 6 currencies. Whatever the gurus are promoting, those are the specialty dealers. Dinar Inc. or Exchange of America, they deal with a lot of other currencies. So it's not their primary currency that they deal with. Whereas these other currency dealers, those were the primary currencies they dealt with.
Yeah, liquidity's always been a problem with the dinar investment. When I first came into the dinar world, it didn't really seem like that big an issue because there were dozens of dealers, and they were just popping up all over the place. But one by one, they've closed shop or been busted, and so it's becoming more and more difficult now for dinar speculators to liquidate if they need to.
Yeah, well, the other thing, too, with the dinar dealers, I mean, if they're not selling, then they can't staff their people. They can't pay
Right.
for, people on staff and stuff like that. So obviously, if they're not selling, there's no reason to be in business.
Right, and there's no reason to be buying if they're not selling. They've got to have a place to sell their merchandise at a profit in order to be a viable business, and that's why they make it so difficult to buy the stuff back, because they don't want to end up with tons and tons of dinar that they can't sell. They got to make sure that there's a ready market for them to liquidate their inventory, and
well,
that market's it's been dwindling for years now.
Yeah, well, one of the reasons, if they buy dinar and they have an excess amount of dinar, what are they going to do with the excess amount? It's not going to sit on the shelves, because if it's not making money for them, they've got to give it back to Iraq.
Iraq doesn't want it.
Iraq doesn't want it? Oh, no, they don't want it at all, because that means dollars leave the country. They want dollars.
They want it to stay out of their country. Yeah.
Which means when they would denominate, they stand to make quite a bit of money, because all of the money that is outside of the country is going to have a hard time coming back into the country.
I don't think they really want to deal with all of the disillusioned speculators. I don't think they want to deal with all the fallout from a redenomination where people can't exchange. And I think that's the reason they've just been dragging their feet on this redenomination. I really have come to the conclusion that they're not going to redenominate. They've talked about it repeatedly, but really, what kind of progress have they made toward putting up a new currency and doing the conversion over to a new currency? They talk about it, but I don't really see any action. I don't think they intend to. I think they're just going to leave that money out of the country and just keep on dealing with a two currency system.
Yeah. Well, here's the other thing that people don't know about. Every guru's talk about the lower denomination notes that are out, and they're in the ATM machines, and they're just waiting for the announcement, and blah blah blah. The problem with the lower denomination notes, and that goes along with the redenomination, Parliament has to vote it. If Parliament doesn't vote it in, it doesn't happen. So if Parliament hasn't voted and approved the redenomination project, no lower denomination notes have been printed. They haven't been designed. Nothing. Nothing has happened with those lower denomination notes. And for the past 10 years now, all these gurus are saying the lower denomination notes are available. They're out. They're just waiting for the announcement or someone to push the button or waiting for the green light. So right there, if Parliament doesn't approve it, it hasn't happened.
Right.
That should be the end of the story.
9 years ago, Dan Atkinson was telling people that they had the new lower denoms loaded into the ATMs in Iraq, and they were just awaiting the activation or something like that. He was telling people back in 2000, well, it was 2010, so I guess it was 8 years ago, telling them 8 years ago that those new, and Oki was saying that too, and I think Frank was too, that these new lower denoms were out and they were loaded in the ATMs ready to go any day now.
Yeah, and that's what's basically been in the Guru News, is that the ATM machines, they have new ATM machines, et cetera, but I found some article somewhere that they've always had ATM machines for years. And they're saying, they got new ones out and they're using them, and I'm sitting there going, they've been using them all these years though.
Yeah, they've had ATMs, but the people just didn't want to use the ATMs because they didn't want to use the banks. They didn't trust the banks because of all those years where Saddam could just take their money away if he wanted to.
Yeah.
It's been a very slow process of building any kind of confidence in the banking structure. But yeah, so you that's Frank is still out there. Oki has retired. Dan Atkins is still out there.
Oki hasn't really retired. He's still out there. He gets reports from Elmer and Art and stuff like that. I think I saw something today about don't call Oki anymore, about the rates and dates and stuff like that. Apparently his phone number's out, and people are now calling him for intel. And I'm just trying to figure out why he hasn't changed his number. I mean, this has been going on for years and years now, that people just call his number. It's like, well, just change your number, and people won't call you anymore.
Yeah. Well, when I say he's retired, I meant from doing the intel stuff. I haven't heard him on a conference call or anything like that in years.
Well, yeah, it's been about 6 months. I think he joined Art on a conference call, and
he did.
He was on and he was on another conference call some other, a few months before that. So he occasionally makes a guest appearance on a conference call, just so his name's out there, et cetera, et cetera. But he doesn't really give out intel anymore, and it's pretty much everybody's figured out that he never had any intel to begin with.
Right.
And as it goes along with all these other gurus, they don't have any intel, because if you read what they're saying, they've been wrong for years.
Yeah. Who was the one person who said that the next move on the dinar would be a devaluation?
You?
That's right. And I didn't have any intel. I don't have any contacts. But
yeah, actually, there's a few people that are kind of posting that direction, but you actually posted it in black and white. So
yeah, I was just going by the numbers. I was just going by my understanding of their policy and the numbers. And I thought, well, if the supply is constant and the reserves are dwindling, then that's going to put downward pressure on the dinar. And it wasn't as big of a devaluation as I anticipated, but it was a devaluation.
I've actually posted a few graphs over at Dinar Daily showing that they're pulling the money supply in and out. They're constantly adjusting the money supply according to the reserves they have to maintain the rate. That's how pegged currencies work, I guess. If you're saying that that's the rate you're going to guarantee the exchange to be, then you've got to, either increase your reserves or pull the money supply to maintain it.
That's what they mean by a managed float. According to John Jagerson, none of these are actually technically pegged. They refer to them as pegged, but he said they're very tightly managed floats. And I don't know, John Jagerson's the expert. I don't really understand the jargon on some of these things. He said the only truly pegged currency is the euro, because it's several countries involved and they have to keep all of the ratios coordinated. So according to John Jagerson, none of these pegged currencies in the Middle East are truly pegged. They're just referred to as pegged because they're very tightly managed floats. And they all manipulate their money supply to maintain exchange rate stability, because their reserves are going to go up and down. Their money supplies, go up and down from time to time, and they're constantly adjusting things to maintain that equilibrium. We didn't understand when we got into this thing that that's how it works. And people like Breitling's always talking about, oh, it's a dirty float. It's a dirty float. They're not showing you the true numbers. Well, no, they are showing you the true numbers, but the numbers are in a constant state of flux, because that's how they maintain stability. But there's nothing sinister he says dirty float like it's, there's something nefarious going on. No, it's just called a dirty float. That's another way of saying a managed float. And Saudi Arabia does that, Kuwait does that, Bahrain, they all are on a very tightly managed or dirty float. That's how they maintain stability.
There is one thing that kind of stuck with me a little bit. That's that Trump owns dinar thing. I'm sure you've heard about that. Trump owns dinar. Oh boy, let's dispel a myth real quick. If Trump owns dinar and everybody expects Trump to push that button or make the green light greener or whatever as far as letting the RV go, can't do it because that would represent a conflict of interest. So for those folks that are waiting for the RV to happen because Trump is going to push the button, he can't do it.
He gets scrutinized on everything he does because of his international business dealings. Can you imagine the furor if this guy made a foreign policy decision based on lining his pocket with about $1 billion? No, it's silly. Besides, that's not his background anyway.
Yeah, his background's into real estate and stuff like that. I mean, if he were going to invest in Iraq, he would put a casino up.
Yeah, and that's probably not a bad idea.
That would make more money for him than revaluation of a currency.
Yeah, either a casino or a hotel where they can have boxing matches and beauty pageants and something like that. Yeah, but currency, he's never been the kind of person who talks a lot about currency speculation. None of these guys. So Warren Buffett has never been interested in currency speculation. Warren Buffett has always been interested in value investing. He finds companies that can produce value. And he's kind of conservative, but he's very successful with it. But to think that any of these guys like Bill Gates or Trump, Warren Buffett, whoever else, that they're going to be playing around with currency speculation, people who do that generally are they're people who have money, but they don't have billions. Okay, they have a few million, and they've got enough to play Forex.
And they're not going to do it with the dinar.
Oh, no. The dinar is not on Forex. It's never going to be on Forex. Because Forex is for free-floating currencies primarily. So, yeah, no, the whole Trump thing, that was a rumor 8 years ago. When I got into the dinar world, I was hearing, Donald Trump bought $1 billion dinar. And I thought, man, if that's true, that's a good reason to get into it. But it wasn't.
Well, that kind of goes along with all the bank stories that you hear going out there. Most of the bank stories are from TNT, and all it does is it keeps people engaged in a conversation about a revaluation of a currency. And the only reason to keep people engaged in a conversation about a revaluation of a currency, especially from the gurus, is because it generates income for them.
Right. It keeps dangling that carrot out there in front of the speculators.
The more they keep listening to the calls and donate to me, or, hey, I'm going to shut the forum down unless I have money this month to buy for it or to pay for it, or whatever the excuse of du jour is, that's all that does.
Yeah, it's a little side business to it's or cottage industry, whatever you want to call it. These, like Bruce has his like health products. I think Frank has products that he sells. Adam Montana has his VIP thing that he sells. Dave Schmidt has his seminars. Breitling has his seminars. In fact, the only person that I see out there that doesn't have anything to sell is Foot Forward. And that guy's just, strip crazy.
Yeah, that's being polite about it. He's a little far gone, but
I mean, all he's selling is himself as a prophet. He's just trying to convince people that he's a prophet of God, and he's heard from God about the RV and all this foolishness that he's come out with over the past few months about Iran, and when the bombing starts in Iran, the RV is going to happen within a few days, and God told him this and God told him that. Well, look, God told him the Tigers were going to win the World Series of 6 years ago, and they haven't won it yet. So that shows you how accurate his prophetic credentials are. No, Foot Forwards is nuts, and the rest of these guys are just stringing people along so they can sell them a bunch of investment crap. That's basically what it boils down to.
Or trusts or whatever else, health products and stuff like that they're affiliated with. Hey, I got a question for you.
Okay.
When it comes to currency speculation, and especially surrounding the dinar community, is it an advantage to join a VIP membership?
It's an advantage to the person selling the membership.
So if people are speculating that the currency is going to go up and they're going to get lots of money, joining a VIP membership doesn't have any privileges?
It has features and benefits, okay? The feature is, well, we're going to get you a better exchange rate after the for the RV, because we've got so many people in our group. This is Adam Montana's big selling point. We got a big membership in our VIP club, so we can get a better rate at the cash-in or exchange or whatever you want to call it for the RV. Think about that for a minute. If you go into a bank and ask them what kind of deal, I say, I got 1,000 people who bought dinar, and we're all going to do our exchange at your bank. What kind of a deal can you give us? Okay, after they get through laughing, here's the deal that they'll offer you. Leave now, and we won't call the funny farm. That's the deal. You're not going to get a better exchange rate because you won't find anybody that considers this a legitimate investment. Don't take my word for it. Go down to the bank and ask them yourself. All right. Okay, so what are some of the other benefits of VIP? Well, you get the opportunity to interact with Adam Montana. Whoopee. You get that opportunity to interact with a former adult porn or a adult humor site, Beer and Shots. That was his background. He had everybody sold on the idea that he was a Harvard graduate. No, he's basically a guy who ran a couple of SEMI websites.
Yeah, you also have Frank's VIP membership.
Yeah, I don't know that much about Frank's VIP. My background, I was a member at Dinar Vets, and that's where I cut my teeth.
Yeah, I guess, if you're a VIP member with Frank's group, you get to talk to Frank and Delta and people like that. But then again, it has no advantage.
No. And think about it now. I know Adam Montana Adam charges like $50 for 3 months, I think. So basically it's $17 a month. If you put that $17 a month, because he's had some of these people invested in VIP for years. They've been paying him $17 a month for 5 years or more. If you were to put that $17 a month in the stock market over the past 5 years, what kind of return would you have gotten?
Yeah.
And what kind of return are you getting putting it in Adam Montana's pocket? So I don't see any advantage to anybody except the people selling the membership. And I don't know if there's any other VIP programs out there or not. I know Frank and Adam have one. Did Dan Atkinson have one?
A lot of the gurus kind of have some sort of membership. I know Caparoni has, he's blaming it on Brandon or whoever's running the site, that if you don't donate, you don't get to become a member. So is that considered a membership?
Yeah, I guess membership or VIP membership, because I was a member of Dinar Vets because I registered there and I could post, but I wasn't a VIP member. But if you're talking about paying memberships, yes, Dan has a paying membership there. And Stryker went private and he had a paying membership. It is a business, okay? I mean, let's just call it what it is. These guys are running a scammy dinar pumping business.
I've actually called it the dinar industry.
Yeah. Yeah, they've come up with alternative ways of making money off the dinar without actually profiting from the dinar. And they make it by selling stuff, by selling memberships, by selling seminars, by selling products. Terry Kay produced a recipe book, for God's sake. He had a cookbook or something that he was selling. I mean, they'll sell anything and everything that if people are willing to buy it, why not, you know? And Marcus and I just made the decision years ago that we weren't going to make any money off the dinar, because then people would question our motives. It was very important to us that we got the word out that you're not going to make money on the dinar. They've been lying to you. The dinar's never going to be worth more than 1/10 of a penny. And delete the zeros does not mean revaluation. It means redenomination. Executive Order 13303 had nothing to do with the right to buy a dinar. You've been lied to about all this stuff. And it took a while for us to educate the dinar community, but slowly it began to have an effect. You know, but if we had some sort of a membership or some sort of a cookbook or, you know, health products or something that we're selling on the side, people would have said, well, it's just another, you know, scammy person trying to make money off the dinar. So by not having a product to offer, we've managed to dodge that accusation anyway.
Well, that's kind of all I got on my list of things to talk to you about. I don't know if you've got anything to talk about, but...
No, just all I'll say is just one more time. I've been saying this for 6-7 years now. Don't listen to the gurus. They're lying to you. Do your own research, and I think you'll conclude that there's no money to be made with the Iraqi dinar. You're better off putting your money into gold, Bitcoin, or preferably something a little bit more solid like real estate or the stock market.
Now, are you saying Bitcoin's a good currency to get into?
No, I'm not saying that. But people, at least there are people who have made money on Bitcoin. Unlike the dinar, there have been people that got rich off of Bitcoin.
So basically, you know, I've seen some horror stories on Bitcoin, but basically if you're going to get into Bitcoin, do a lot of research on it.
Yeah. Well, I think that the people who took a chance 5 years ago and got in on it, they made money. But at this point, I don't see any money to be made in Bitcoin. But, hey, I thought that 4 years ago, and I was wrong. So who knows?
Yeah, it's like anything you're going to get involved in. Research. Look at it carefully. Just don't believe one person because they say so. Find someone else who's in the industry to back it up.
Yeah, don't trust these anonymous gurus. It's your money. Do your own research and use a little critical thinking. And I think you'll come to the same conclusions that we've come to. Okay?
Okay, I think that's it.
All right, goodbye, everybody.
All right, we'll talk to you later.